I took one of those emergency pills my psychiatrist gave me, and I went to bed. It just knocked me out. I didn't like taking those, but, that was the only way to stop it, was just to either get knocked out or blackout. And so I took one and I went to bed, and I came to, and I was crying, and I went to wipe my face, and I couldn't because my hands were behind my back in handcuffs. And I was like, what's going on? And I realized I was in the back seat of a police car.
Jo, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, I was really looking for a way to get healthy on my own, and I knew that that was possible. I had been in better health and felt more amazing physically in my body in my mid 30s than I had in my entire life. But by the time I was 40, I felt like I was aging and falling apart, and that I had really lost that health that I had.
I know that feeling.
Really? Apparently it happens at around 40 to most people. So let me go back and tell you what happened. I think it all started the first time I was ever put on a medication. I went to college halfway across the country from where I grew up. It was a different culture and a different climate. And I was a very serious student. And so I think I was probably really stressed that year. And I lost my cycle. I didn't have a period for the entire year. And so I finally went to a doctor, and the doctor put me on birth control to start up my hormonal cycle again. And I didn't know anything about birth control, like potential side effects or whatever. And I actually didn't know this until a couple of years ago. But apparently a lot of women find that going on birth control initiated like a lifelong struggle with serious depression in their lives. And that happened to me. So the first year I was on it, well, I was only on it for a year, but several months after that, I had a major depression. And that was the first kind of inkling of any mental health issues in my life. I didn't know that it was depression. It was actually triggered by a criticism from a professor that I really respected. And so I just thought I was a failure, but my reaction to that criticism was way out of proportion. And my feelings about myself, how dramatically they changed, didn't make any sense. So I'm wondering if there is a link between that medication and what happened to my mental health. At any rate, I didn't have any way to cope with that depression. It was 2001. It was Texas, and nobody was talking about mental health problems, and I was just ashamed of myself, so I didn't tell anybody. And I just reached for food to kind of comfort myself. And I got obsessed with like carbs and sugar and treats and things like that. And of course I gained weight, and of course I felt bad about myself for that. And then I started going to the gym and trying to burn it off. And I was counting calories and counting the calories that I was burning off on the treadmill, and just getting into this ridiculous obsessive cycle that was really unhealthy. And I knew that. So I finally went to the counseling office, and I got a counselor, and I told her what was going on. And she sent me to a gal that helped people with eating disorders. And I don't know what that lady said to me. I have no idea, but it must have helped, because I was able to get out of that cycle quite quickly and stop the obsession with food and calorie counting. And at that time, I vowed to myself I would never look at a nutrition label again. And I would never think about calories or fat content or any of that. And that served me quite well, but it actually is one of the reasons I messed up my carnivore experience at the beginning, but I'll get into that later. So I got out of the eating disorder cycle, but I still was having trouble with depression and self-esteem and all this kind of stuff. And so my therapist sent me to a psychiatrist, and he put me on an antidepressant. And not long after I was on the antidepressant, I started having like a personality change and a lot of reckless behavior. Like I had been a really responsible, conscientious, like straight A student, and now I was just becoming reckless and getting involved in bad situations, and traumatic experiences happened, and it was just kind of getting out of control, and I didn't really understand what was going on or how to stop it. So I ended up just going off the antidepressant because I felt like whatever this is isn't it like I'm not better. So I kind of got life back under control, but during that period of time I had started smoking and drinking, and so um I found out that worked a lot better than food at helping sort of suppress the emotional troubles. And so, unlike the eating disorder, that one kind of stuck around, or those stuck around. And it was it was controlled enough. I was okay. I was able to go on with life and fulfill my responsibilities, but um, it was kind of impacting my self-esteem that I was smoking. And um, I got involved in a car accident when I was 22. So that was kind of the next major thing that disrupted my life. And I had a traumatic brain injury at that time. Um, they couldn't stop the bleeding. I had to have a emergency surgery. And when I got out of the hospital, I had like a lot of problems with cognitive function. It was hard to do simple math problems. It was really hard to concentrate. I had a ton of trouble with short-term memory. I couldn't multitask anymore. I had been quite good at that. I couldn't do it at all. And so it was scary and difficult to kind of adapt to. And I know you might understand a lot about that. The doctor that I saw after that injury told me that the brain only heals for about 1 year or 1 to 2 years after it's injured, and I believed him. So that was pretty depressing when I got to the 1 year mark and the 2 year mark, and I wasn't back to myself. But I, adapted and went on. And the good thing about the accident was I got a little bit of money from the insurance company because it wasn't my fault. And so with that, I was able to go pursue a dream I had since I was a child to go and live in Europe. And so I went to Belgium and I lived there. And while I was there, I think it was around the third year, I was dating a Belgian man, and he and I were kind of discussing some of these ongoing problems I'd been having. I had a really hard time waking up. I had a really hard time concentrating, completing tasks, and obviously really bad depressions that lasted for many, many months, like 9 months at a time. I would be severely depressed and couldn't get out of the house. And even though I was living my dream in Europe, and I was really excited about my life. So something was wrong, and so he took me to a psychiatrist, and she diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. And I was actually really happy to hear that, because I thought, well, there's finally an answer. There's finally a reason I'm having all these struggles. It's not my fault, and there's medication, and I'll be okay, and I'll get back to normal. It'll fix me. And so I was really hopeful that things were going to get better, but they didn't. So I was put on a couple of medications at that point. The side effects were awful. I immediately gained 40 pounds in a year without changing my diet or exercise. And I'm 5'4", so that's a lot of weight on me. And that made me feel really bad about myself. I moved back to the States, and I made a couple more major moves in the next couple of years, and had a bunch of different psychiatrists, and so many different medications. They just kept trying new stuff and changing the combinations, and everything gave me side effects. Some of them were semi-permanent. I had a rash on my chest from one of them that is supposed to be potentially fatal, and that rash stayed for 12 years. Um, Another one is like a tardive dyskinesia or something. It's like your involuntary movements in your muscles of your face. And I still have some of that from a medicine I stopped taking 10 years ago. But of course, they didn't tell me that that was a potential complication or risk of taking those medicines. Um, so I, at one point, like I couldn't focus on a word on the page because my eyes were shaking. That was going on for a while, and I told my psychiatrist at the time, I can't keep my eyes still. What is this side effect? And he said, I don't know. I wouldn't worry about it. Here's some more prescriptions to go fill. Let me give you some more medications. And I said, I think I want less medications, not more. And he wouldn't have it. So I got a new psychiatrist after that, and he was willing to help me go off my meds, or at least reduce them, and see if we could do better with less. And I was in the process of that. I was almost off of all of them under his care, and I was taking magnesium supplements, and he was really helping me go in a more natural direction, which is what I wanted. Oh, and meanwhile, of course, these medications never restored me to a feeling of well-being, and I'm in control of my life, and I'm doing well now. I never felt okay, and I never felt like myself, and I felt very distanced from life, and other people and myself while I was on them. So it was a really empty existence. And I always felt like I needed to smoke, and sometimes I needed to drink to feel okay, even though I was so medicated, you know. So I was hoping I could get off the meds. I also wanted to quit smoking and drinking. I didn't want to do that. I didn't feel good about it, and I did. I quit smoking and drinking in 2013, and I was going off all the meds. And then I had the bright idea to go become a vegetarian, and so um, I quit eating meat as well. And about 3 weeks into that, into not eating meat, I became very ill. And I called it a mystery illness. I had horrible severe diarrhea, and I was very, very weak, but I also was having these experiences that they would last like 30 minutes to an hour, where I would just suddenly be so weak I could barely stand up. And if I wanted to walk across the street, someone had to help me. I basically couldn't walk. My heart was racing, and I was short of breath. And then after that was going on for 20 or 30 minutes, I would start crying uncontrollably, probably just because it was scary. And so I couldn't stop crying. And that was what the episode was like. And then, it would pass, and I'd have another one after a few days or a week. So I went to my doctor and told her what was going on. And she said, I don't really know what that could be. And she checked me over, didn't find anything, and sent me on my way. It got worse and more frequent, and I ended up like having to be driven home from work and that kind of thing. So I went back, and luckily I had an episode while I was in her office, and my resting heart rate was 136. So I was 33 at the time, and not really overweight. Well, I was a little overweight, but I wasn't obese or anything. So she did an EKG, and she did some other heart test, and she didn't find anything wrong. And so she said, I think you're just depressed. I think you should go see your psychiatrist. And I said, I've had depression for 14 years. I don't think that's what this is. But I did call my psychiatrist, and I told him what happened. And he said, okay, let me see what I can do, and I'll call you back. And so he called me back, and he said, I think I want you to go to the hospital. And I didn't want to go to the hospital, but I thought, well, maybe they can do some tests that my doctor couldn't do. And so I was willing to go. But as he started giving me instructions on where to go and how to check in, I realized they were sending me to the psych ward. And I knew that no one there would believe me that something was wrong with my physical health, and I would never get well if I went. So I refused. And then I was really scared because I didn't know how to find help, because now my doctors didn't even believe me. And so, I told my therapist, and she luckily saw a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. And she suggested I go to him, and I did. And he was amazing. He was beloved in the community and extremely well respected and extremely gifted. It's reported that he's cured over 10,000 cases of cancer. And he identified that I had a candida overgrowth, and he treated me with herbs. And I had to brew this really strong tea in a pot on the stove that I could barely pick up, like this small saucepan. I was so weak I could barely hold it. And I made this tea, and he put me on a candida diet where you can basically eat meat and vegetables that aren't starchy and quinoa, and that's about it. So I did that for 3 months, the tea and the diet, and completely cured me. I lost 40 pounds, and I felt amazing, and I was full of energy, and my mental health was still, as it had been, but physically, I had never felt so full of energy, and that was in 2014. And so I went back to work, but pretty soon after that, I had another health crisis that took me out. And this time, it was my mental health. It went to new, previously unknown levels of bad. So I was having this hypersensitivity issue where it was mainly sounds, but a lot of things could overstimulate me easily. So I couldn't really go to like a coffee shop or a restaurant or be anywhere where people were because it was overstimulating. And I was just so sensorily raw. I've since found out that there's a word for the sound sensitivity issue. It's called misophonia, and it's actually quite severe. So when you hear a sound that's disturbing to you, you actually get a physiological fight or flight response, where you want to punch someone or run away, run for your life. It's like a really severe, extremely distressing experience of sound. And so that was going on, and I wasn't able to handle it. I ended up getting I ended up going into psychosis when these experiences would happen. So I was staying home. I was housebound. I wasn't trying to do anything anymore. But even so, like, there was a lot of gardening on the street I lived in. So the lawnmowers and the leaf blowers, and I would wear earplugs and noise canceling headphones and all of that, but I could still hear them. And I would basically go into an escalated, very, very extreme version of being overwhelmed, overstimulated, and eventually, sometimes it would get so bad that I would black out. So I'm still not drinking at all. I'm not smoking at all. I'm taking my meds as prescribed. I'm doing everything I know to do to take care of my mental health. And I'm telling my doctor about this, and he's, trying different things and throwing other medicines at me, and nothing works. Like, I was even taking benzodiazepines. I didn't want to take them because those can be addictive, but he said, just try this in one of those events when you're feeling so bad. And I got to the point of chewing benzodiazepines, like a couple of them, to get it in my system faster, and it didn't make a dent in the distress, in the level of distress I was in. I was desperate, and I started looking for help everywhere I could find it. I went to a couple other sort of naturopathic doctors. That was so confusing and complicated, Dave. They had me on like all these little drips and drops of things at different times of day and all these pills. I had like 2 7-day pill boxes, like days of the week pill boxes, 2 of them full of supplements that I took for one day. Like that was a day's worth of supplements, you know? And I was mentally ill. So like it was really hard to keep track of all this stuff. I felt like I was never doing it right. And so I was always wondering, is that why this isn't working? Because I didn't remember it, dose 17 on that day or whatever. And it was just really frustrating. It didn't work. I mean, I was desperate. And I even went to like this lecture on faith healing. I was so desperate. And I didn't know what else to try. And then and this was going on for like a year. So one night I had another one of these episodes of emotional torment. And I took one of those emergency pills my psychiatrist gave me, and I went to bed. It just knocked me out. I didn't like taking those, but that was the only way to stop it, was just to either get knocked out or blackout. And so I took one and I went to bed, and I came to and I was crying, and I went to wipe my face and I couldn't because my hands were behind my back in handcuffs. And I was like, what's going on? And I realized I was in the back seat of a police car, and they were taking me to jail. And so I got bailed out, and when I got out, I was just racking my brain, trying to think, what have I not tried yet? And the only thing I hadn't tried that I had heard of was a kind of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. And I was already in 2 different therapists' office every week. So when I heard about that, I just thought, that's too much therapy. I can't do that. I can't do more. But I decided after getting out of jail that I would find a therapist who did that and try it, because it was the only thing I hadn't tried. And sure enough, that really helped me. So the therapist's name was Neil Friedman, and he's wonderful. And DBT is wonderful. And it's, in my opinion, the most effective form of therapy for severe mental illness or anything that's like just emotions out of control and you can't really handle it in the moment, because it teaches concrete skills that you can apply right away. And it teaches mindfulness. And mindfulness was really, 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 really helpful to me. And I found out that that making art is a way to practice mindfulness. So I just discovered that, like, when I was doing anything with a pencil and paper or colored pencils or whatever, even just coloring, I could feel at peace and I could feel calm that way in the moment. So that changed my life. And I started doing art. And then I was having a lot of back pain from doing art, because I've also had chronic back pain since I was 14. And it was really severe by my early 30s. I would spend all of my free time laying on a heating pad because I couldn't even stand up for 5 minutes because of how severe the pain was by that point in my life. And so I really couldn't do as much art as I wanted to for my mental health because of the back pain. So I started doing yoga, and yoga ended up helping me with my mental health and my back pain. And so I started doing an hour of yoga a day. Between that and the art and the DVT, I was able to stabilize my mental health. I was still on psychiatric meds, but I don't think they did that much. I think it was those other 3 things that allowed me to recover most of my life. So that had been like a 2-year ordeal. And I wanted to start kind of rehabilitating myself into the world. So I got a volunteer job picking fruit for a charity that made food for people. And I started making friends and getting out in the community and doing stuff. And little by little, my health practices started to slip. I started, going out to eat with people and drinking Dr. Pepper, and here and there drinking some alcohol, and then here and there having a cigarette. And I just didn't want to be thinking about my health all the time anymore. I wanted to kind of feel normal and have a social life and just relax a little bit. But you know how that slippery slope is? You just have one puff of a cigarette, and then, you know, and then you have a couple cigarettes, and then you're buying them. And so that's what happened with my good, clean health. And of course, it started deteriorating my gut health over time. I eventually moved to live closer to my parents after 2020, and that's, I think 2021 is when I moved, and then 2020 really impacted my thinking about my health, as it did for many of us, I think. My husband, he was my friend at the time. He pointed out when the supply chain issues started happening that during Hurricane Katrina, a lot of the chaos that was happening in New Orleans had to do with psychiatric patients not being able to get their medicines on time. And he said, you might want to get a couple extra refills on your prescriptions, because the supply chain seemed kind of uncertain at that point. And, they won't let you stock up on psychiatric meds. So I knew I couldn't do that. I also really didn't trust these medications because I'd had so many bad experiences with them. And I also was starting to not trust my doctors. But I was scared to go off meds because of what happened the last time I tried to do that. But I realized, it'd be better to do that in a controlled setting than end up in a situation where I have to. So I did. I very gradually, over about a year, went off of 5 psychiatric meds that I was on at that point. And so that happened in 2021, and then I moved to Texas, and then I turned 40, and meanwhile, my diet is getting more and more compromised. I'm actually still cooking for myself. I've been cooking for myself since 2014, primarily, but going out to restaurants once in a while, fast food once in a while, and drinking a lot of Dr. Pepper. And so I started having some gut problems. I also started having some candida symptoms again, and I was a little bit scared about that, particularly because the doctor who had healed me, about a year afterwards, he and his wife and their 5-year-old daughter were murdered. And so his name's Dr. Henry Hahn of Santa Barbara, and it was kind of a big deal in the community at that time, obviously. So I didn't know where to find that kind of help again, and I also pretty much knew I couldn't afford it. And I also really wanted to know how to handle my own health myself. I just really wanted to be not reliant on somebody else for my health anymore, So I started looking around for an answer. I ended up talking to a nutritionist who gave me a list of supplements to take and told me how important it is to eat organic food. And so I went to Whole Foods, and I came home with one measly grocery sack of, supplements and a few greens, a few vegetables for $150. And I was like, there's no way I can do that. I can't eat this way. I can't afford it. And I can't afford these functional doctors. And I thought to myself, this is crazy. There can't be no way to be healthy without being rich. I just thought there has to be a way to be healthy without a lot of money. And I was on a mission to figure out what that was, but I had no idea it would be carnivore. I had never heard of carnivore, and I had never heard of keto. But I was looking for, information about healing candida on YouTube and diet and health stuff. And somehow YouTube recommended a carnivore video to me. I don't know whose it was. I don't remember, but I started watching everything I could from there. And the thing that struck me the most was the simplicity of the diet. I loved that. But also the testimony of so many people that identify themselves as sugar addicts and carb addicts, saying that it got rid of their sugar cravings. So I had actually quit smoking in 2022. I found the carnivore diet in 2023, but I was 8 months into quitting smoking and I still had cravings. So I thought if it could cure sugar cravings, maybe it could cure cigarette cravings. And I also wanted to quit drinking. I had been having quite a bit of depression after moving, and I didn't want to go back on meds. And I'm still pretty sensitive. So I just found that drinking actually did a better job of sort of muting the sounds and the stimulation of the world and, helping my emotions not be so overwhelming. It did a better job than medicine. And I actually kind of trusted it more than whatever medicines the doctors would give me. I don't think drinking is a good idea, and I don't think it's safe. I think it really damaged my gut. But I was kind of using it consciously in a medicinal way for a while until I figured out how to manage my symptoms without it and without meds. So I found those videos and I started watching everything I could. And it still took me about 6 months to give up the drinking and go for it. Because the last time I had given up drinking and quit meds or gone off most of my meds, I ended up in such a bad situation. So I was really scared to do it, to be honest. Luckily, I met somebody on X who is local to my area, and he was willing to meet up with me. He was on Carnivore for 3 months at that time. And so he gave me a lot of encouragement and answered some questions and just helped me get motivated. And so I started about a week after I met him, and I did it all wrong. So I, like I said, I don't like counting calories. So I also didn't, have any intention of counting carbs or, thinking about numbers and calculations. But I didn't realize, because I haven't looked at a nutrition label in 20 years, that milk has sugar in it and carbs. So I was getting this wonderful raw milk from a local dairy, and I thought that was carnivore and that was fine. And I was, drinking probably 1.5 quarts of milk a day for the first 3 months. And I didn't know that was probably keeping me out of ketosis. So after 3 months, I wasn't feeling much better. And I started trying to figure out why. And when I figured out that I shouldn't be drinking so much milk, I switched milk to cream in my coffee. And I cut out just the drinking milk part. And then I started drinking more coffee. I was drinking decaf, but I was drinking probably like 3 really big coffees a day. I just found out, Dave, did you see Dr. Barry's short not too long ago? He did a short about how coffee has carbs.
No, I didn't.
Apparently black coffee has a little bit of carbs. So I think he said 12 ounces has 3 carbs of black coffee. And I was probably drinking 3 times a day, maybe 24 ounces. So with a bunch of heavy cream. And then I was also having oxalate dumping. So I was doing the little bit of dark chocolate. Even 100% dark chocolate has a little bit of carbs. And I was also having some cheese with a lot of my meals. So I think between the coffee and the cream and the chocolate and the cheese, I probably wasn't in ketosis for the next 4 months either. And so that 7 months of carnivore, I wasn't in ketosis more than likely, and I wasn't really feeling a lot better. And I was starting to get scared because, if this doesn't work, then what am I going to do? So I got a little bit of help from a couple of people I met on X, Valerie Ann Smith, who healed from mental illness and anorexia. She's wonderful. She gave me a consultation over the phone, and she suggested L-theanine, which is a really good supplement for anxiety and stress and for lowering cortisol. That really helped me just kind of get my stress level down, which was really helpful. When I first took L-theanine, I thought, oh my goodness, this is what those meds were always supposed to do and never did, you know, just made me less stressed and didn't give me any side effects. So that was cool. And then I met Doc Smith on X, and he is trained in some of the Chinese principles. And it turned out, I had no idea when I first met him, but he studied Qigong with a student of Dr. Han, who cured me of candida. So I was really excited to find that out and meet him. And he gave me some really wonderful tools. I was having bad insomnia 7 months in, you know, and he helped me fix my circadian rhythm by teaching me to take sunrise and sunset walks in nature, and also cold showers in the morning. So after implementing those, I started sleeping a lot better, and that was really helpful. He also helped me with some pain I had in my neck and spine by using resistant stretching techniques that he developed that were really effective. And he also encouraged me to go off dairy completely and to go off coffee or reduce it as much as possible. And so with his encouragement, I did that. I went off dairy and I dramatically cut back on the coffee. So haven't completely quit it, but I'm having no more than once a day and not every day coffee. And so that has helped. All of those things have helped a ton. I will tell you, I probably have, started ketosis around the beginning of February when I quit the dairy. And I lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks, where I hadn't lost any weight at all on carnivore until then. And I haven't lost any weight since either. So I think I went immediately down to my ideal weight in 2 weeks of quitting dairy. I just thought that was interesting. And for anyone else that's, stuck at a weight, just maybe try cutting dairy if you hadn't done that before. And I lost 2 inches around my waist just so fast. It was wild. And my sleep got better. My brain fog got better. My digestion gradually started getting better. Let me see. Oh, I wanted to tell you too that before I cut out the dairy and went into ketosis, actually a lot of good things happened anyway. I had a temperature dysregulation so that I'm always too hot. I would keep my house at 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And then if I went somewhere else, it would be miserable because I was always too hot. And I live in Texas now. So I had heard that somebody else said they were always too cold, and on carnivore, they got warmer and they're fine now. And I was like, oh, I hope that doesn't happen to me. But that's the beauty of healing. Something that truly heals you. It doesn't just go one direction. So for me, I was always too hot, and carnivore allowed me to be cooler. So I'm comfortable at 72 degrees Fahrenheit now. So it just moderates, whatever is out of balance in your body. I think that's so great. I also had this skin condition called melasma, where I had darkened patches on my face. It looked like I had a mustache. And I was told that there's nothing you can do about that other than to bleach your skin, which I wasn't going to do. And that has mostly resolved. I think I can still see it faintly, but it's gotten a lot less. And that happened in the first months on carnivore. So that was cool. Yeah. And, a bunch of those little things that people talk about, like I don't get hard calluses on the bottom of my feet anymore and stuff like that. But then I actually came across, I think, a video by Dr. Brownstein, or an interview with him about iodine. And I suspected I might have low thyroid or something relating to thyroid. And I wanted to try taking iodine, but I had taken a couple of drops a day before, like Dr. Bright recommends, and it didn't seem to help anything. I, for some reason, I think something Dr. Brownstein said encouraged me to try a higher dose. And the first day I did, I noticed that I wasn't thirsty that night. So this is another thing that's been going on for 10 years. I've had excessive thirst. And it started when I had those really major mental health problems in 2015. I was drinking 1.5 gallons of water a day because that's how thirsty I was. And of course, going to the bathroom all the time. And that really has never resolved. I've gotten a little less thirsty and drink a little less, but I was really trying to stop drinking water at night because of the insomnia. And after turning 40, I couldn't sleep through the night anymore, especially, when my bladder would wake me up. So I was trying to not drink water at night, but I just couldn't because I was so thirsty. And the first day I took a higher dose of iodine, that thirst went away and I didn't need to drink that evening at all. And my mouth had saliva in it and I just felt comfortable. And I thought that was so cool. I did a search on DuckDuckGo for, is there a connection between iodine and thirst? And I couldn't find anything. And then I remembered that someone had suggested using Yandex because it's not censored for medical information. So I searched the same thing on Yandex and I found an amazing article by a doctor on his blog about iodine called How Much Iodine Can I Take or something like that. And it went into the history of iodine's use in medicine before the pharmaceutical companies were developed. And it was used in huge doses, even in children, to treat all kinds of things. And it was really effective at treating all kinds of things. And he even went into that in that article saying that it can be used to treat candida. And so that really got my attention. And it even gave specific instructions about how much to use when you're treating candida. And so I followed those instructions and I took 32 drops of 5% Lugol's iodine for 3 weeks. I'm not sure if the candida is completely gone. I think I still have a little bit of an issue with that, which is probably why I'm not, completely healed from everything. But it's gotten a lot better. At any rate, taking that huge dose of iodine completely changed my mental function basically overnight. I can multitask now for the first time since my car accident 20 years ago. I can keep track of lots and lots of details in my head without writing them down. I used to have to write down every little thing or I would forget. I put my cell phone down the other day in a strange place that I normally wouldn't remember, and I usually lose it like 10 times a day and can't find it. And somehow I remembered where I put it. I was able to just kind of go back through the steps in my head and remember where it was. So I just have like this mental clarity and speed and function and just mental ability I haven't had since I was a teenager, I think, after just adding iodine. So that just blew my mind.
That's awesome. At this point in your journey, how are you eating day to day?
Sure.
And how much iodine are you taking now?
Yeah. On the iodine, I just decided to increase it to 40 drops. I'm doing 40 drops in 4 different doses. So 4 times 10 drops each day right now. But that was after kind of backing down for a period of about a month to anywhere from 8 to 16 drops a day. I'm kind of experimenting. But when I backed down to 8 drops a day, I was having brain fog again and thirst. Like the same symptoms came back. So I'm assuming that I was very iodine deficient and I need more for a while. On the food, I'm eating mostly beef and eggs, tallow, and lots of butter. That was another thing I had to tweak. I had to start tracking my macros, so that I could find out if I was having enough fat. I had to just get over myself and my my commitment to not looking at numbers with food, and figure out what am I really doing and what do I need to change. And so that was really helpful. Valerie encouraged me to do that, and it was a good tip. So I I figured out how much I need to add butter to get to the 80/20 ratio for protein to fat. So I try to eat mostly beef, but I will kind of supplement that with pork belly or sometimes bacon, or um, a little bit of salami here or there if I can find one that's clean ingredients, just for adding another flavor. Um, and every once in a while, I have a little bit of olives because I like sour flavors, and I feel like that doesn't harm me. But yeah, it's mostly beef and butter and eggs.
Is that 2 times a day, 3 times a day?
Yeah, not 3 times. I don't think I've ever eaten that often. I try to do OMAD, or I try to do intermittent fasting, but it's kind of hard to eat a lot at once. So I usually end up having as big of a meal as I can, and then a snack if I'm still hungry later.
Nice. Um, and so, as for meds now, all the meds are gone?
All the meds are gone. Yeah. Yeah. I
Nice.
um I see it as no medication is without consequences, and we aren't necessarily told what those might be. So my goal is to be med free for the rest of my life.
Nice. And uh, you mentioned your husband before. Is your husband kind of doing this with you?
Um, he is just now starting to work towards it, and I'm really excited about that. Yeah, he's eating a lot more meat now, and he's uh, kind of reducing carbs and not eating carbs every day and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Oh, nice. So I do want to go back to part of your story that I just want to ask, what caused you to be in handcuffs?
um, so I don't remember, um, but kind of piecing things together afterwards. Um, I think that somebody in the neighborhood heard me screaming and called the police. And I think they opened the door and I spoke to them. And I think whatever that exchange was, they didn't like it.
I see. Thank you. I just the whole time that I was kind of that was in the back of my mind. What? How did you end up there? One thing that we'd talked about before we had this interview was you've let your creative side really take off, and you've written a book about this for kids, right? Could you talk a
Yes.
little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Well, I was on X one day in the carnivore diet community, which I love and has given me so much support and encouragement. And I saw some people talking about their kids, and one child that didn't want to eat meat anymore, and somebody else said there ought to be a carnivore book for kids. And I looked into it, and I couldn't find one. And I thought, wow, there really ought to be. And I just sort of had that in the back of my mind. And one day I just had an idea I had an idea about the opening of the book, and I started writing, and it just kind of all came out. And I decided to see if I could put that together and um, do that as something to give back to the carnivore community, because I've gotten so much so much education for free, like on your channel, and all of these people putting this information out for us to help us heal. So I wanted to offer something back.
So what's the name of the book, and how, if people want to get hold of it, how can they do that?
Sure. It's called Fuel for Your Fancy Machine, and more or less looks like that. And it's on Amazon. Um, so, yeah, just search Amazon Joe Vertis Fuel for Your Fancy Machine. Thanks, Dave.
What would you advise someone if they wanted to start the carnivore diet? What would your top tip be for them?
Well, my top tip would probably be to track your macros and find out if you're in ketosis. I did have some good results from eating only carnivore foods without being in ketosis, but I think I would have had a lot better results much more quickly if I had gotten in ketosis sooner. So whether you want to track macros or get one of those testing options for testing for ketones, I've never done that myself, but I think it's important to be in ketosis if you want to get the miraculous results that everybody talks about right away. And then I would also say you probably need more fat than you can possibly imagine. And I thought I was eating a lot of fat, but it wasn't enough.
So how can we find you on social media, Joe?
Sure. I have started a YouTube channel, not about carnivore, but about creativity. And it's called Creative Flow with Joe, at Creative Flow with Joe. So you can find me there. And I'm on X as well. And I'm Tahini, or at TAHINIOK on X. And that's where I talk about carnivore a lot.
Nice. Well, I'll link to those below. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us, Joe. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dave, for everything you do. I appreciate you.